Well, got my Jane hat on, so that must mean that it's time to talk some more about YouTube favorites.
Well, what's the first thing an actor learns? The show must go on. Come rain, come shine, come snow, come sleet, the show must go on. So Reedy, Pagliacci, Reedy.
Reedy, huh?
Yeah.
So to partly understand why this particular video is on my favorites, we need to have a little history. So when I was growing up, we would go to my grandparents' house every Thanksgiving to make candy. Now obviously this is something that we still do, but when I was but a wee lad, I didn't really help with the candy all that much, so I needed to find other ways to preoccupy my time. Now, my cousins and I, specifically my cousins Emily and Ben and I, who make up the group Jeb, which I know that I've talked about in the past, never really had difficulty in finding our own things to do to preoccupy our time. But one of the things that we did fairly often was watch movies. Now, at my grandparents' house, there were 3 VHSs that we watched a lot. Because, yeah, I grew up in a time before DVDs, so it was VHSs that we watched all the time. Those 3 VHSs are We Sing's Marvelous Musical Mansion, Thoroughly Modern Millie, and finally, Singin' in the Rain. Now, of those 3 VHSs, Singin' in the Rain is definitely the one that we watched the most. So much so that when I was thinking about Christmas presents to get a few years back, the first thing that popped in my head was to get Singin' in the Rain on DVD, which I did. So this particular movie holds a very special place in my heart, plus I do truly believe that it still holds up. I still think it's a good movie. And, finally coming to this particular video, my favorite number from this movie was Make 'Em Laugh. I don't know why I said it was as if it was a past tense thing, it still is my favorite number. So I'm not going to go into too much detail here because I'm not here to describe the entire plot of Singin' in the Rain to you. But the basic background of this song is that Donald Lockwood is feeling very sad for reasons that I'm not going to go into right now, and his friend Cosmo Brown is trying to cheer him up. So the song literally exists to cheer somebody up, so you know it's got to have something to it to help people cheer up. And what it has are the marvelous antics of the late Donald O'Connor. I mean, this guy clearly knows exactly what he's doing throughout this entire piece. Not only is he a fantastic singer, but he's also wonderful at physical comedy. Every single thing this guy does is funny. Every single move that he makes, every single note that he hits, no matter what he does, it's funny. Physical comedy is one of those things that seems a lot easier than it actually is. You have to get that comic timing exactly right, otherwise it's just not going to work. And Donald O'Connor does it perfectly. So every time I watch this, I am just completely and utterly floored by how great he does, because not only is he doing all this physical comedy, but he's also singing. Now I acknowledge that he probably sang it earlier, so he's not singing in the midst of doing all this physical comedy, but he is making it look like he is singing, which is also a pretty difficult thing to do while doing physical comedy. And I think the other thing that I super appreciate about this number is that all the stuff that you see moving around, while it is certainly there for the physical comedy, it also makes sense in the context of the scene. This song takes place in a movie studio, so all the props being moved, all the set pieces being moved makes perfect sense. So while we know that this stuff only exists because Donald O'Connor is going to run into it, or tumble over it, or interact with it in any way, we also aren't taken away from the scene because of that. Because all of these things would exist on a movie set. They would be moving things around because they're trying to get it to where it needs to go. I also really appreciate the background characters of the scene because they're looking at Donald O'Connor not in amusement, but in annoyance. Which makes sense because they're trying to move things, they're trying to do their job, and here's Donald O'Connor walking around while they're trying to move things. So it's a nice little touch. So to me, this is probably one of the best pieces of physical comedy that I have ever seen, and that is why it's on this list. So while we obviously know that this stuff exists just so that Donald O'Connor can be hit in the head with it, or to tumble over it, or all this kind of stuff, so while we know that these things only exist so that Donald O'Connor can run into it, or tumble over it, or interact with it, it doesn't take away from the fact that So while we know that this stuff exists just because So we know this stuff exists just because So while we know this stuff exists